Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here at Karahan Tepe, one of the most important sites in the world that you probably have not yet heard of. It is much like Gobekli Tepe with these T-shaped type pillars, but almost entirely unexcavated so far. So in this video, we are going to do our best to give you all of the information that you need to know about this incredible site in Turkey, here where very few seem to wander, as we've seen from the roads coming in here. So you do not want to miss this amazing video. "25 years ago, deep in the hills of southern Turkey, a shocking discovery was made. A megalithic site that would forever change world history. With T-shaped pillars similar to those found at the groundbreaking site of Gobekli Tepe. The locals call it Kecilitepe. The archaeological community calls it Karahan Tepe. We call it the rewriting of the very history of ancient human civilizations." In 1997, the site was first noted in academia following studies done for the determination of the culture inventory of Şanlıurfa. For years, it sat largely unknown despite the enormous magnitude of the finding. Fast forward to 2017, and the site, possibly older than 12,000 years old, begun to get the attention it deserved. With excavation efforts being headed by Professor Necmi Karul of Istanbul University, history was about to change forever. Before we get into all of the details regarding this incredible site, let's fast forward once again to September 2019. I had a trip planned to southern Turkey to research ancient sites including Derinkuyu, the enormous underground city, as well as Gobekli Tepe. Considered to be the oldest example of human civilization in the world. I had heard of Karahan Tepe and I had wanted to see the site, but I didn't expect to get the piece of news I was graced with at nearly the last moment. The timing worked out perfectly. I got a text from someone who will remain unnamed for now regarding the beginning of excavations at the site of Karahan Tepe. That's right, I was going to the region and it just happens that shovels were simultaneously being put in the ground at the same time. The moment I heard the news, I knew I had to be one of the first people on the ground following said excavations. I had to be one of the first people to touch the T-shaped pillars after possibly as much as 10,000 years underground. Like Gobekli Tepe, it is likely the ancient site was purposely buried by the ancients, almost like a time capsule. A window into a lost ancient civilization from the Ice Age, more than 7,000 years before any humans were thought to have organized as a civilization. We rushed across the Turkish countryside, quickly losing cell phone signal and finding ourselves further and further down terrible dirt roads, through countless cotton fields, passing countless farmers and pickers along the way. We were not sure if we'd even find the site, but we were determined to find it. I'm telling you guys, if you want to go to Karahan Tepe, it's a little bit out of the way and a little bit undeveloped. Alright guys, we are about 3 kilometers away from Karahan Tepe, and you could tell that not a lot of people know about it yet, but it's mostly farmers and mules and so on around this area. But it's pretty cool to think that, you know, some years from now this might be an incredibly important spot. I think it's important now, but I mean, I think the rest of the world will be aware of it at that point. I was traveling alongside nomadic journalist Josh Friedman, as well as my friend and gracious trip donor Fred Cost. After driving past mining operations and finally down a new unpacked asphalt road, we came upon a farmhouse with a hill in the distance. I got out of the car and introduced myself to a young man who spoke a few words of English and asked him if I could see the site. He agreed, though he did not want to be on camera himself. I respected his decision, and he hopped into our vehicle and we headed over a few smaller hills and carefully over bedrock towards the little-known but extremely important site of Karahan Tepe. Before we get into our vast findings at the site, it's important to give you all some context regarding why the site is so important. For the past 200 years, the mainstream archaeological community has been incredibly stubborn when it comes to dating the first examples of ancient human civilizations. The year 3000 BC has been desperately clung to for centuries as a timeline for the emergence of civilizing humans working together as a society, the so-called end to the hunter-gatherer period. Many in the mainstream have questioned this timeline, but still, the majority have done whatever they could to cling to confirmation bias and do whatever they could to ensure the timeline prevails in the history books. So much of the dating of ancient sites has been simply convenient based on an already preconceived date of around 3000 BC or later. One would be surprised how little evidence led to the strongly held belief that the Sphinx and the pyramids of Egypt were built around the time of Khafre and Khufu. Meanwhile, thanks to the groundbreaking work of geologist and professor Dr. Robert Schoch in the early 1990s regarding the dating of the Sphinx, the whole archaeological community was tossed up in the air. The textbooks were heavily discounted. Schoch determined that there was water erosion around the Great Sphinx and that the water erosion simply couldn't have formed on the enclosure around the Sphinx in the time period given for its construction to today. That it would take many thousands of years at the minimum, 6,000 years to form. He expressed his belief that the Sphinx could likely have been built back around the last ice age, what we now call the Younger Dryas Period, a period of great cataclysm following the much larger ice age that preceded it. This dating fit into the timeline of the Giza Plateau being lush with foliage. The belief was that the Sphinx was simply repaired after thousands of years. The head cut down to a smaller size, mimicking a pharaoh rather than Leo the lion, which the Sphinx perfectly faced around the epoch of 10,500 BC, what the Egyptians called the first time, Zep Tepe. It makes sense considering the head is the least eroded part of the Sphinx despite being the only part of the Sphinx above sand for its entire known existence. Interestingly, the ancient dynastic inventory stela also detailed the Sphinx existing before dynastic Egypt. This timeline of the Egyptian Zep Tepe around 10,500 BC fits perfectly with the star alignment of the Sphinx and shafts of the Great Pyramids. It fits perfectly into the timeline of Noah's Ark and Gilgamesh. It fits into the timeline of Atlantis. It fits into the timeline of water reaching Pumapunku in Bolivia, an ancient megalithic site that's extremely impressive that appears to have been a port town despite Lake Titicaca being many miles away. Most importantly, this Egyptian first time fits perfectly into the timeline of what we now know as the Younger Dryas Period, which just in the past decade has been proven to have occurred more than 12,000 years ago following a massive meteor impact, possibly at the Hiawatha Glacier in Greenland, causing waters around the world to rise rapidly and causing hell on Earth for many years, wiping out 75% of all mammals in North America and affecting the climate of the entire planet. Nearly every ancient civilization in the world speaks of this cataclysm. Their stories are dramatically similar despite having no contact with each other. They all speak of a great flood and falling stars. They all claim their gods passed down advanced information from that epoch. That the Earth was resettled with the memory of its technologically savvy past. Like a game of historical telephone, if you will. Information being passed down through the ages. Each civilization applying their own cultural belief systems to the same epoch stories. From Egypt and Babylon to the Americas and stretching from China and India to northern Canada. There are over 600 Great Flood stories. Of 86 stories analyzed, 62 of them were completely independent from each other with absolutely no contact between civilizations. You can see our film Ancient Cataclysm According to the Ancients for a deeper understanding of this phenomenon, and browse our Ancient Civilizations playlist on YouTube for more. Anyways, the takeaway from that point is that the climate begun to straighten itself out following the cataclysm, and several decades ago an amazing discovery was made from around this time period. Estimated to have been built between 10,000 BC and 9600 BC at the earliest, the site of Göbekli Tepe stunned the world when excavations were done on the site near Şanlıurfa in Turkey back in the 1990s. T-shaped pillars were discovered, and the understanding of ancient civilizations were flipped on their head. The lower down archaeologists dug into Göbekli Tepe, translated from Turkish to mean Potbelly Hill, the older the site got, with astrological symbolism illustrated on the reliefs of the stone pillars of enormous size and animal bones scattered throughout the soil. 95% of Göbekli Tepe is still underground, but just the 5% excavated thus far has forced universities to rewrite textbooks on the ancient world. Mysteriously, for no known reason, the people of Göbekli Tepe decided around the 8th millennium to bury the site completely. If the first civilizations emerged around 3000 BC, one would have to assume that primitive people threw down their spears and decided one day to build the most enormous, impressive structures ever in the history of the world without any architectural or religious background, at least not a mature understanding of such things. Many of the oldest sites from this epoch cannot be properly recreated today with modern tools. This is shocking to say the least. Well, after the finding of Göbekli Tepe, the mainstream was forced to reconsider their belief system, which of course did not go without critique over the years. Now, the notion is that primitive people around the last ice age threw down their spears and stopped throwing mud in order to erect an amazing monument like Göbekli Tepe without any prior knowledge to such stone cutting. The embossed reliefs were extremely sophisticated, yet these people were not supposed to have had any background in such art. Then suddenly, for no reason, they buried the sites, picked up their spears again, and went almost 7,000 years without building anything, only to pick up their spears again and build Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. Anyone else find that absurd? Well, we are now finding out that Göbekli Tepe was just the tip of the iceberg. Sites just like Göbekli Tepe are popping up everywhere, proving that it was not alone and may not even be the oldest. In fact, one would do good assuming that they had a bit of practice at the very least previous to the construction of Göbekli Tepe. In fact, one would do good considering the possibility that there was an advanced human civilization during the last ice age that we've simply forgotten about over the ages, and that we are just left with the myths pertaining to such a civilization, deified by less sophisticated people over time. What I believe to be the most important new finding in the world of archaeology is the site of Karahan Tepe. Few have heard about it, and only a couple people have ventured there with a camera, including author Andrew Collins many years ago, who did a great job researching astrological alignments at the site. Karahan Tepe has to be at least 10,000 years old, considering Göbekli Tepe was purposely buried around that period. Surely there would have to, at the very least, be some sort of influence that would lead to people building such a similar site 23 miles southeast of Göbekli Tepe. Nestled in the Tektek Mountains just east of the ancient biblical Haran plain on an active pastoral farm sits the incredible site of Karahan Tepe. The hill itself was naturally formed and consists of Eocene and Miocene limestone. The hill rises almost 100 feet with a large quantity of bedrock jutting out of the south and west side of the hill. However, the rest of the hill, as well as the ground surrounding the hill, is covered in hundreds of T-shaped pillars, slightly exposed to some degree, many in circular formations. After speaking with the son of the man who found Gobekli Tepe on his farm decades ago and purchasing one of his well-crafted stone imitation pillars from the Gobekli Tepe gift shop, I spoke with him for a while about the site and what the site meant for the known history of ancient civilizations. I asked him about Karahan Tepe and the possibility of showing up there. He told me about the recent excavations done at the site by the renowned professor Nekmi Karul and showed me how to get a hold of him. While I couldn't immediately get a hold of the professor, I decided to go off-grid and find the site anyways. It was too tantalizing. The notion of a groundbreaking site like Karahan Tepe finally receiving some much-needed attention carried enormous possibilities for me, and to be one of the first on the ground following the third excavation at the site seemed like an impossible opportunity to miss. The site was first noted in academia in 1997 during studies done for the determination of the culture inventory of Şanlıurfa. Though according to the farm owner, he told us that 25 years ago he discovered the first megaliths at the site. In 2017, surface studies were done by the University of Istanbul. 250 T-shaped pillars were discovered at the site. The latest of the 3 excavations were done in September 2019, just 2 weeks before we showed up at the site. As Professor Nekmi Karul noted, and I quote, "Even from the aerial photographs, over 250 obelisks on the surface are seen. We think that there are more structures with obelisks underground." One of the owners of the property told us that Karahan Tepe is much bigger than Gobekli Tepe and that it was possibly twice as big. In fact, as the professor later told me in an Instagram message, and I quote, "Karahan Tepe is bigger than Gobekli Tepe, but not twice, I would say." So that should be clarified. The professor also noted something else I found very interesting. He said, and I quote, "Life in Gobekli Tepe is not only limited to a period of T-shaped stones, it reflects a much longer process. There is a settlement of 700 to 800 years. It is certain that Karahan Tepe is somewhere in this period. It may cover a longer period of time, or it may begin before. The excavations here will reveal all these, but at least we can say that this process coincides with a significant time period, a contemporary period. This means 11,500 years before today. We believe that the fact that Karahan Tepe is within the Tektek Mountains National Park will provide an opportunity for different projects integrated with archaeology." As we approached the site in our vehicle and parked upon the hill in a gravel patch, we walked towards the first obvious example of megalithic construction. What the farm owner claimed was a house, complete with what kind of appears to be a snake relief on the wall, though it was extremely hard to make out and I couldn't properly film it as it was so incredibly faded. I wasn't sure about it being a house, but it certainly was a structure of some kind. The man showed us around these excavated structures a bit more before I asked about the T-shaped pillars. I was extremely excited to see what was exposed.
This is definitely a piece here.
Where's the T pillar?
See this one right here?
Yeah.
You can touch it. There you go.
Where's the T pillar?
They're under plastic,
Oh, there we go.
but there's a piece of one over there.
It's a bigger one over here.
So is this the top of a T right here?
It's the whole thing.
Ah, I see. See, there's a piece of one right here. And there we see the first examples of T-shaped pillars. One laying down mostly broken and the other covered in plastic. But that barely scratched the surface. We began walking towards more stones seemingly jutting out of the ground everywhere we looked. Here at Karahan Tepe we have the top of one of the T-shaped pillars that are so familiar at Gobekli Tepe. It's still in the ground. You could see that it has been affected by the elements, and once excavated you will see basically around the same color as you see at Gobekli Tepe. You can see where it's carved out here around the edges and around here, and obviously it is very much weathered over time, but it's amazing that very few people know about this site yet, but it's really starting to catch a lot of people's attention because everywhere you look on this hill you could see these T-shaped pillars jutting out of the surface. Just imagine what's underground in this site. It's amazing. As we approached another larger pillar, it was becoming clear to me we were in a far more dry climate than Gobekli Tepe. Obviously, the T-shaped pillars were mysteriously buried on purpose here as well, or else they likely wouldn't be standing up. But they were also obviously exposed and covered in lichen. What this told me was that as the desert panning across Syria approached the area, the land was in a state of decay and the soil was withering away from the stone pillars, once buried in a far more wet climate. This was allowing the pillars to be exposed, unlike at Gobekli Tepe, where soil was piling up in layers on top of the purposely filled soil. The desert climate was approaching fast, and you could feel it in the air. The difference between the climate in Şanlıurfa by Gobekli Tepe and the climate around Karahan Tepe could almost be felt in the sinuses. Dustier, drier, a land somewhat past its prime as farmland. We have another very large megalithic piece of the original structure. You could tell by the size that it was quite big, and it stands out. You can definitely notice it here on the surface. There's more over there behind me, and again, basically everywhere you look, it's amazing, and you show up here and you have it all to yourself for the most part. It's something that many years from now will be looked back upon, because there's definitely going to be a lot of tourism here in the years that follow. This is underground here.
But they're sticking out everywhere.
Yeah, it's amazing. You could see them all over there too.
They have a double-sided curvature.
I'm standing here and I've literally got a piece of history in my hands. This is a piece of maybe a pillar, maybe a relief, maybe something, I don't know, but it's part of the original structure. And it blows my mind. You could see the famous colors of the stone inside, and then the erosion on the outside, and the mold and moss and all sorts of stuff. Just everywhere you look. It was quite incredible the amount of ancient relics littering the ground. Much of them likely to one day sit in a museum's collection as excavations continue. Oh, yes. You could see just these little areas where they're jutting out of the surface, standing upright.
Spear tip.
This is the stuff they flake off the outside.
You could see pieces.
This is flint. Some places they call it chert. Interesting. It's a chip when they're flint napping. flint knapping they usually do with an antler of a deer with a piece of leather on their lap, and they make their arrowheads.
Here we have evidence of tool.
Yeah.
Sharpened.
You could see
These
a
were
hole
chipped off.
through
You might
this
not even
rock
notice.
here.
This is a chip
See the
off.
sky, but through the hole.
As we passed by countless examples of flint and chert as well as arrowheads made of stone, we stepped over the top of T-shaped pillars to be excavated in the future. We looked on down the hill to see stones placed in a circular fashion.
So we continue on up the tepe, the hill, towards another part of the site. I mean, I'm literally walking on these rocks here, as you can see below, and everywhere I look you could see them carved out. It's astonishing that it's taken so long to find this place, and it tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about how much we aren't yet aware of when we're finding these sites that predate what we know as ancient civilizations. Look at that. Perfect alignment. They got compass marks on it. Ah, I see. Well, there are certainly no shortage of interesting carving in these rocks as we come to the top of the hill, Karahan Tepe.
Probably a place where they were doing some kind of a craft.
Yeah, you can see them over here. It's probably like a mold or something.
Little craters everywhere.
And here you find more holes carved out into the rock. Maybe they were molds, maybe they were using them to fill with water, I don't know. I can't really tell you one way or another, but it's incredibly interesting.
We then headed down the side of the hill over bedrock to discover something truly incredible.
A bit of a steep hill, and it's windy.
The farm owner showed us an unfinished T-shaped pillar still attached to the bedrock.
So they cut out of here. Ah. So what we have here is quite interesting. What you see here is an unfinished T-shaped block. This is a smaller part on the bottom, and then it goes on up to the top. That's where I guess the T would be cut out, and it's here in the rock of the actual hill. So this is basically them leaving us an idea of how they actually did these things straight out of the hill. It's amazing how some of these cultures left basically a history book for future generations to see literally how they did things. You could see how it was cut around. It wasn't finished. It's what they call an embossment. They haven't even finished that yet, but it's how they drag the stones and don't damage the finished piece, and then they shave it down after that. But they would design animals around this and be able to cut it down around the animal. They'd probably leave a square for the animal and then carve everything around it and then carve down the animal. It's amazing that you could still see this right here at the site. I just hope that they start excavating further soon, because it's amazing. You could see these T-shaped blocks everywhere, and here's one of the amazingly large unfinished ones. There's a chance that this might have been left because it was broken. I'm seeing this here. It's almost like they left it because they made a mistake.
Something I couldn't help but question was the relevance of the unfinished pillar. One was found at Gobekli Tepe as well. Why on earth was nothing ever done with it? They built this massive site and then leave an ugly unfinished pillar just sitting there for everyone to see. Did they not care about the image of the site? Could it be that something happened to cause them to suddenly stop building the site and instead bury it? I mean, leaving the unfinished T-shaped pillar there tells me that the site was buried while they were still building it. I could be wrong, but it seems highly unusual. I doubt it was left sitting there for hundreds of years before the site was buried. Make sure to comment what you think of the unfinished stonework. The owner and guide at the site picked up a dark rock and handed it to me.
So apparently this is for using as a tool on the rocks. This is what we've been told, that you hit it and you carve out the rock with it.
Now, I'm not contesting that the rock was carved out with its boss using said stone, but how were stones polished in such a fine, smooth way, assuming the stones are anything like Gobekli Tepe? I'm certainly not saying they couldn't have done it, because they certainly did, but at every major megalithic site in the world, we are told the people who built the structures did so with rather primitive tools. In fact, the claim regarding Karahan Tepe is that hunter-gatherers built it much like Gobekli Tepe. It amazes me that this is still the most prominent theory. I mean, it could be true, but I find it unlikely. People that couldn't even farm somehow built amazing megalithic sites? So stone cutting came before planting seeds and harvesting? Another seemingly unlikely scenario. Humanity has existed for more than 200,000 known years. In all that time, only 12,000 years ago, and then again 5,000 years ago, did people finally start to build things together, and very suddenly. The notion of working together to create things never came to people in the hundreds of thousands of years previous to said civilizations. The professional opinion of the academics are somewhat alarming in my opinion. Again, many academics don't believe the mainstream thesis, but the amount that do worries me as far as breaking confirmation biases going forward. As I looked around, I saw what appeared to be more bedrock coming out of the surface, in some cases in a fashion that almost appeared as though there were more unfinished pillars under the grass. There was flint everywhere, as though it had rained from the sky. It was time to climb back up the rocky surface to the top again and continue on towards more impressive megaliths.
There is no shortage of hill to climb at Karahan Hill, that's for sure. Lots of climbing. It's nice, it's not overrun with tourists yet.
I don't know what they are.
It seems like they're quarrying it out of the same hill that they were building it in.
Karahan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe.
This is just absolutely amazing. Exhausting, but absolutely amazing.
Quite suddenly, the T-shaped pillars begun to get more and more impressive. Remember, at Gobekli Tepe, the pillars closer to the surface were the newest, while the oldest were the most impressive, and as we worked our way down, I couldn't help but notice a more impressive method of building to some extent.
And on we go down the T-shaped, pillar-laced hill of Karahan Tepe. There's a lot to be seen here. And there's no crazy boardwalk like at Gobekli Tepe surrounding the area, that's for sure. Oh wow.
And here we have another T-shaped column. And you can see kind of a hole in the top. I think that might have been natural over time actually, but as you see below, it's definitely carved out and very noticeable standing above the soil. It's interesting how soil deposits hadn't completely covered up this spot as much as we saw at places like Gobekli Tepe. I think it's a slightly different climate and it's closer to the desert. We are quite close to the region of Syria here at Karahan Tepe, and the climate's just slightly different. It's not as wet. So that's an interesting point to be made about this site, because obviously it would contribute to these places not being as heavily inundated with soil over a long period of time.
And as we moved on down the hill, we found the most impressive pillar yet, partially excavated with a unique relief down the side.
Look at how noticeable this column or pillar is. I mean, you could see the carving around the pillar. It's sticking out of the ground. Anyone walking by would notice it. You could see it was recently excavated up to this point, because obviously you have the different erosion and the different mosses on top, but you could see it's far more clear on the bottom, and you could see the carving around it. Over here you have another piece of a pillar that you could see has been carved down the side as well. So these were finished pillars, obviously, that have been covered and kind of just forgotten over, man, 10 to 12,000 years. Think about that. Think of how significant that really is. It's an absolute honor to be here. And who knows, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, this whole place is going to be filled with people wanting to look at this amazing site.
It's clear that the pillars seen at this point are quite small compared with Göbekli Tepe. But so were the first pillars excavated at Gobekli Tepe before further excavations were done, uncovering the incredible enclosure D at the now world-famous site.
And we continue down the hill, and look at this. We got stones aligned. Where have we seen that before? That's a large column that fell. It's broken in half, but that's really big. Wow.
More flint.
Here we would have seen a big tower coming up and falling over.
Yeah.
And this is a countryside.
Photo. Photo. Thank you. Someday you make a lot of money.
You almost don't know where to go next at the site, as the megaliths are sticking out of the soil everywhere you look. But we follow the kind young man guiding us through his property.
Oh.
We appear to come upon some kind of wash basin. I'm not sure what it is, but it appears to serve a functional purpose. We see another T-shaped pillar and then again another bathtub-shaped stone object, which looks quite familiar to something I had seen at Gobekli Tepe. We continued to walk over countless examples of megaliths. The number of pillars was almost absurd if it weren't for the sheer size of the hill in question. We begin to walk towards the newest excavation site, something I had been very excited to see. The soil is freshly dug up and darker than the surrounding soil.
Here we see evidence of a lot of excavation. So they're definitely really starting to get a move on here with a lot of these T-shaped pillars. And again, what we see on the surface is, if we learned anything from Gobekli Tepe, is that the stuff on the surface is younger than the stuff beneath it. And we see at lower down areas, again, larger pillar sizes. And you can see there's plastic on them at the moment because they're currently excavating it. And they're trying to keep it from, I don't know, erosion, from pollution, from, you know, from being damaged in any way. But this is amazing. You can see they're really starting to cut out this land here, and tells you there is some progress happening. But we have been told that there likely won't be any more excavation until next year because the season is quite dry at the moment. You can see there's some more below me, and here, and here, and here, and here, all over the place. Chances are there are still quite a few pillars underground here, and it is cool to see that they are getting to work here. But you can see through these bags that they've placed over the pillars that these are quite extensive, and they don't want to make the same mistakes they made at Gobekli Tepe. There were some pillars that were damaged, etc., in excavations, so they're being very careful, and that makes me very happy to see.
We head back towards our vehicle parked upon Karahan Tepe, attempting to take in everything we had seen. It was almost emotional. The magnitude of this little known site and the ability to walk throughout it, largely unrestricted, was one of the events of a lifetime for me. It was something I knew I would never forget.
All right, we are about to leave Karahan Tepe here after many days of exploring different places in Turkey that are absolutely amazing. This is Josh Friedman, and of course you can find him on YouTube as well. Josh, what do you think about, what is your reaction to walking around this site here in, well, wherever we are in Turkey?
Wherever we are.
Yeah,
that's part of it. There's just these vast hillsides, but
yeah.
What's my reaction? I would say intrigue, mystique. That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe we have stumbled upon what's left of a very advanced ancient civilization, but I have no idea. And as we walk around here, often it just feels like I'm on a nature hike out in a very dry, deserty type of area in the Middle East, but it leaves me with all this intrigue and mystique.
I don't know what to say, guys, to finish off this report other than to say that it's a land full of mysteries. There's so much underground. Just imagine the amount of things just below your feet. Now, this land is one of the most historic in the world. You could probably find thousands of things, thousands of cities, thousands of settlements that we're not aware we're walking right on top of. This hill is a great example. It's far, far off the grid, so to say. And, you know, the more the mysteries that we find, the more questions we tend to have. Isn't that always the case? So I'm just honored to be here. This was a truly amazing place to visit, and I'm going to be coming back here for sure. But I hope that all of you have learned something from this video.
As we head back towards the farm, the owner invites us into his home and offers us tea and water from a well he told us was 400 feet down on the property. We sat and drank a much needed water before bidding him farewell and driving off down the road, hoping to eventually get a cell phone signal so we could find our way back to the main highway system and go on to our next adventure in southern Turkey. According to Professor Necmi Karul, heading excavations at the site, the next excavation will take place next August and September,
during a wet season. I've been in contact with the professor and have requested a visit during the next excavation. He was gracious enough to accept my request, so I hope to get back there, though I cannot do it without the help of you, the audience, so make sure to check the links in the description and comments for ways to help us. I cannot say whether the professor subscribes to some, if any, of my views on lost ancient civilizations, but what I do know for sure is that he is doing incredible, groundbreaking work. I made sure to tell him how much I appreciate his hard work and how important it really is. The site of Karahan Tepe isn't too far off from Mount Ararat of the biblical Genesis flood. It's in Mesopotamia, which translates to between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. It's in one of the most important historical regions in the entire world, with millions of untold secrets lying just beneath the surface. At Karahan Tepe, there's evidence of pillars as tall as 14 feet. The site was analyzed by author and researcher Andrew Collins, who had written books on Göbekli Tepe and is very prominent among researchers of lost ancient civilizations. I feel it necessary to read into some of his analysis documented on andrewcollins.com. According to Collins, and I quote, "The first thing the visitor notices when ascending the hill's northern slope are the partially exposed heads of stone pillars that emerge into view from beneath a hard deposit of soil that hides their stems and sometimes most of their heads. These sunken pillars climb toward the summit of the tepe for a distance of approximately 50 meters, 164 feet, forming what appears to be a stone avenue. Its roughly north-northeast to south-southwesterly orientation matches not only that of the hill, but also that of the stones themselves. Two further pillars at the northern base of the avenue are turned 90 degrees and so perhaps formed an entranceway, like the U-shaped gateway leading into the Dromos feature forming part of Göbekli Tepe's enclosure C. At least three other stones nearby have the same alignment, complicating any interpretation of the layout and suggesting that the base of the avenue might have included a built structure. As he continues, and I quote, "All three avenues, the northern, eastern, and southeastern, whose approximate azimuths are in the range of 15 degrees, 115 degrees, and 140 degrees, respectively, are aligned towards the same spot. This being an exposed rock ledge or knoll immediately north of the hill's extended summit. The exposed surface of this northern knoll marks the beginning of an extensive area of bedrock covered with groupings of deeply bored cupels or cup marks, usually 15 to 20 centimeters, 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and easily as much in depth. Similar cupels are found on exposed bedrock at Gobekli Tepe, close to enclosure E, the so-called Falsen Temple, Rock Temple, and also at other pre-pottery Neolithic sites such as Bazar Hoyuk and Hamzan Tepe, both located in the Şanlıurfa province. Other much larger holes ranging in diameter from between 40 to 50 centimeters, 15 to 20 inches are also present within the exposed bedrock. At least 3 sets are placed together in pairs, giving them the eerie resemblance of dark eyes gazing up at the beholder. A fact that, regardless of their true function, seems deliberate. In addition to this, we find a large basin cut into the bedrock, which is oval in shape and approximately 3 meters, 9.85 feet, across its widest part. It probably functioned as a water cistern, although this is simply conjecture at this time. 2 similar rock-cut basins are to be seen close to cupel clusters at Gobekli Tepe, and another 3 exist at Hamzan Tepe, again near groupings of cupels. At least 1 complete pillar and several other fragments, which all bear intricate carving, have been removed for safekeeping to Haran University. Other pillars have unfortunately been either damaged or possibly even destroyed during illegal diggings, which mostly take place at night. In size and appearance, the T-shaped pillars at Karahan, which, when fully exposed, would stand around 2 meters, 6.6 feet in height, are comparable with those found in the youngest structures at Gobekli Tepe, such as Enclosure F, the Lion Pillar building, and the various cell-like rooms located in younger layers west of the 4 main enclosures, all of which date to Gobekli Tepe's final phase of construction, Level 2, during the early pre-pottery Neolithic B period, circa 8500 to 8000 BC. The presence of a much larger unfinished monolith still attached to the bedrock on Karahan's western slope indicates that even larger and thus much older pillars probably once stood at the site. The general rule at Göbekli is that the bigger and more sophisticated the pillar, the older it is, with the earliest dating back to the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, circa 9500 to 8500 BC. Karahan's unfinished monolith is 5.5 meters, 18 feet in length, 2 meters or 6.5 feet across its widest part, the T-shaped head, and around 80 centimeters, 30 inches in thickness. Detached from the bedrock, it would have weighed around 15 metric tons, 20 US tons. It is located immediately beneath a raised ridge or escarpment that runs the entire length of the hill summit. On 2 T-shaped pillars found at Karahan Tepe, a carved snake is seen to slither up its front narrow edge. On one originally found in 1997 and now removed to Huron University, the snake looks like a human sperm with a round bulbous head and wavy body, while on the other example, exposed during illegal digging operations and first observed by Chelik and his team in 2011, only the dome-shaped head of the creature is visible, the rest of its body remaining unexposed beneath the ground. In addition to this, a fragment of a chloride bowl found at the site and dating to the same age as the T-shaped pillars bears the relief of a zigzagging snake. The prominence of serpentine art at Karahan might suggest that the creature held a special place among the local population, responsible for the creation of its carved art. It is even possible that the zigzagging avenues of stones found at the site are meant to signify the winding path of snakes, which were seen to descend from the hill's northern knoll down into the valley below, perhaps in the manner of lightning. This suggested directional flow is given credence by the fact that any carving visible on pillars making up the eastern and southeastern avenues is focused uphill, implying that the processional route between them was downward into the valley below. However, the future excavation of currently unexposed stones and an examination of the stems of those pillars where only the heads are now visible might well reveal a different orientation for any carving. So those ideas need to be treated with some caution. Something that Andrew Collins notes here I find to be very interesting. Not only the significance of snakes in the ancient world, as so many of the ancient deities tend to be snake gods, but also the notion of sperm. First of all, they did not have microscopes that we know of at the time to be able to analyze sperm and what they look like on a microscopic level. Secondly, Gobekli Tepe, for example, heavily regards pregnancy and reproduction as something of great importance to these ancient people. Many believe the enclosures at Gobekli Tepe represent a pregnant woman giving birth to all the animals of the world. You can see many representations of genitalia at the site and the pillars themselves, most notably in Enclosure D at Gobekli Tepe. It tends to represent 2 people with hands over genitalia or their stomachs. One can only speculate on what this represents. Could it be the birth of a new civilization? It's interesting that the oldest known statue in the world, the Urfa Man, now situated at the Sonla Museum, which I checked out in person, also represents an individual with its hands on its genitals. Carrying on, Collins notes the astrological alignment of Karahan Tepe, as he writes, and I quote, "Since the Tepe rises to its maximum height immediately south of the aforementioned northern knoll, the natural inclination when standing there is to look north. Doing so directs the eye north-northwest past the farmhouse to a prominent hill or tepe, as noted by Bahattin Çelik in his report on the site published in 2000. Located exactly 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers away from Karahan Tepe, the left-hand edge of its summit is at 338 degrees azimuth with its right-hand edge at 341.25 degrees. This provides a mean azimuth for the center of the hill summit of 339.63 degrees. The strong presence of this northerly placed hill, which we shall refer to as Kecilitepe Tepe, along with the apparent importance played by Karahan's own northern knoll, suggests that the latter might have been used as a back site. In archaeoastronomy, a back site is a position, ideally a prehistoric sanctuary, from which observations are made toward a foresight, usually a conspicuous geographical feature over which or behind which a celestial body is seen either to rise or set. See Jill and Belmont 2009 for a good example of a proposed prehistoric foresight-backsite relationship between two sites on Gran Canaria. If so, then an observer standing on Karahan's northern knoll during the main period of building activity, circa 8500 to 8000 BC, might have been able to witness a celestial event in connection with Kecilitepe Tepe. Should this have been the case, it could well have some bearing on why the Karahan complex was built where it was in the local landscape. Andrew Collins then goes on to note how, when compared with Kecilitepe Tepe, the site matches up with the Cygnus constellation, the celestial bird, around the epoch of 8685 BC. This is interesting to note considering the correlation between Gobekli Tepe and the Cygnus constellation. Anyways, there's so much more to note, but I'll leave it at that. The site is likely one of the most important newly excavated sites in the world of archaeology, and I truly believe that it will flip history books on their heads in the coming years, depending on further excavations. We hope to get back there in the coming year, and we cannot do it without you all. You make these trips happen. If you want to see us report on ancient sites throughout the world in areas many are not willing to go, as well as areas that may be in danger of destruction, please make sure to pledge or donate to us. Plain and simple, we cannot make this happen without you all. Just $1 a month or more makes a difference. We have GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar, where we post subscriber-only content, Float.app, where you can pledge with crypto, and many other options listed below. YouTube is deleting our videos, cutting our audience down by 80% since January of this year, and trying to destroy our ability to bring you free information. The only way for the time being that we can evade these attacks is with your help. We've got many more videos coming up soon from Turkey, as well as some videos from Italy that we are still working on. So don't forget to hit that like button, press subscribe, press to be notified, and follow our latest Ancient Civilizations videos on our Ancient Civilizations playlist. This is just the beginning, folks, and I can't wait to bring you all more on this subject as we work to expose the hidden secrets of ancient human civilizations. Oh, and did I mention there are as many as 12 more known sites in the world like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe? How exciting is that? Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham! Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely appreciated as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we can defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a Patreon. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app. That's flote.app. at Josh Sigurdson, as well as at WAM, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are 2 major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.